Loud. There we go. Welcome everybody to the April Do Tell Story Swap. Spirit fingers. It's nice to see everybody once again. It was already very much like a summer day in some ways today. It was warm, but it's been a beautiful spring. And I think we're going to have a nice evening, intimate evening with 11 or 12 of us here, but it sounds like a lot of us have stories to tell. So we'll jump right in. We'll do a 5-minute break after 45 minutes to an hour. And then there will be a time where we can make some announcements shortly after that before we begin the second half. So I know that one of the first people into the Zoom room tonight was Ellie Shiva, and I am going to invite her to the Do Tell stage. She's spotlit now, and please welcome Ellie Shiva.
Welcome.
Thank you. And excuse me, what is the symbol, the signal that I'm running out of time, and who gives it?
I guess I could give it to you, Elisheva. How long do you think your story will be?
Maybe 6 minutes at the max.
Oh, no, that's fine.
Okay, yeah. No problem. And I apologize for the in the background, but this is a hand-me-down from my job, so it's what I have. So I'm going to be turning off, checking, muting myself when I'm not talking, so you won't have to suffer with it. Unmute myself. I'm unmuted already. Okay, we're going to go on a time trip with me to the past. I am 10 and a half, and it is probably in 1951 in spring. And we have recently, my mom, dad, and my older brother and me have recently moved to Southern California near San Diego. And I am in 5th grade, and all the other 5th graders have spent their whole class since kindergarten as a unit. So here's this interloper, me, and I'm having sort of a hard time with it in a way, because if they want to play a dirty trick on somebody, who gets played on? Me. So I go by the name of Betty because my birth name is Elizabeth, so that's a natural nickname. So, okay, so this morning I get up, I eat, and I go in to get changed for going to school. But I get as far as putting my underwear on, and I realize I have no dress. Now, until I finished high school, girls had to always wear dresses to school, public school, back in the day. So I had to wear a dress or a blouse and skirt. I had nothing with green on it. And it is St. Patrick's Day. Oh no, I can't go. I'm gonna come home full of bruises, pinches, you know. So I'm sitting there pondering this when my mother walks by and says, Betty, why haven't you gotten dressed yet? You know, you have to catch a school bus pretty soon, and it's 2 miles to walk. And I don't drive, so you got to get yourself together, girl. And I said, I can't go. I'm just going to stay home and read my Oz books, Mom. Well, why aren't you going to go? I have nothing green to wear, and it's St. Patrick's Day, and you know what happens. Oh, she says, well, let's see. I know, you just bought your Easter egg dye kit. We'll take out the green bottle and we'll make little green freckles all over your face. Mom, that would be worse. Oh, okay. I've got something. You go in, you pick out whatever outfit you want, even if it's your Sunday school clothes. I don't care. Get dressed, go brush your teeth. And I've got to make a phone call. Well, force of nature like that, what can you do? You just do it. And I heard her on the phone call. It's sort of cool because when we were in Michigan, you had to tell the operator what number you wanted. here you got to do a little daily thing. It is so fun, but I'm not allowed to play with it, so I can't do it. But she comes, she finishes and says, thank you, and finishes, and she says, we've got it. Got your shoes and socks on? Good. Come on, come out on the front porch. So I come out to the front porch with her, and there's a little hill to our left. The street goes up a little bitty hill. And she says, you see that house, the third one up with the bright green door? Oh yeah, I see that, Mom. That's where the leprechaun lives. The what? The leprechaun. You know that old geezer, the guy that just has that funny sort of sound to his voice? And he's got a beard, Mom. I've never seen any other man have a beard. This is 1951. It's not the 60s. And I don't know. What about him? His name, I don't even know his name. It's Jimmy. Mr. Jimmy to you. Jimmy O'Toole. But you don't have to call him by O'Toole. So I want you to go up there and he's got something for you. Mom, I can't do that by myself. You've told me never to go into strangers' houses without permission from you and them, and be careful, especially if it's a man. Well, I'm so glad, honey, that you've learned that lesson. But actually, I know him. We go to the garden club together. So I will stand on the front porch if you want and watch the whole time, because you're just going to be outdoors in the garden. Okay. I'd rather not do it, but I don't want to walk 2+ miles to school. So I run up as fast as I can, because I know that the school bus will be there really soon. And I introduce myself. I say, hi, I'm Betty. And he looks at me, and he is really old. Now, I know when you're 10 and a half, anybody over 17 is old, but he's elderly because he does have wrinkles. He has white hair. He has his white beard, and it's not a cheesy one like Santa's wear at the mall. Well, they don't have malls. Santa wears in the shops. So we introduce ourselves, and he says, come here, girl. I want to show you something. And we walk just down his driveway about 5 feet, and there is this patch of brilliant, wonderful, amazing green shamrocks. Those are shamrocks, aren't they, Mr. Jimmy? They are indeed, my dear. And I brought them myself, the seed, last time I went back to visit my friends. And I brought them back with the seeds. I hid them somewhere, I won't tell you. And I've been growing them for about 10 years now. And there's a big patch here. Lash, you can just go pick out. You have to walk around it and look at each one. And the one that speaks to you is yours. That's where the magic will be. Okay. So I'm very careful not to slip over the edge and crush those beautiful things. And I walk around, I look here and I look there. I'm very conscientious. And all of a sudden, there she is. She is so beautiful. She's like the queen of shamrocks. She's just raising her beautiful leaves up like they were petals. And all the others seem to be bowing in the little breeze to her. He said, that's mine. He says, okay, then you've got to pick it yourself or else magic won't work. So I carefully bend down and pick it like he shows me, and I've got it. And he has never seen that one before, and he has never seen a 4-leaf shamrock before in his life. He says, wow, that's very special. I see it is. Oh, I got to go going now, because we see the school bus going down at the other end of the road, and it's going to go be 3 minutes and turn around and be back in about 6 minutes. So thank you, bye. And I dash down the hill as fast as I can. Mom is standing on the street right in front of our house. She's got some safety pins. She pins it on my collar very firmly. And she gives me my lunchbox, and she spots me gently on the butt and says, go on, have a good day at school today. So I get to school and I go in, and all the other kids see me coming in, and I can feel them sneaking up behind me because they can't see. I have my hand sort of up over my beautiful plant, and they can't see that I have anything green, and they're sort of circling me with their little pinchers getting out. And I say, stop. Whoa, they haven't seen me do that before. And I say, now, if you want to see what I have green, fine. You have to get in 2 rows. And you have to keep your hands behind your back so you won't touch me or my precious thing. And Miss Seeger, if you don't mind, that's my teacher. I adore her. Miss Seeger, you have to get in line too, please. And she winks at me and says, of course, Betty, I'll do that for you. So they come up and they are so blown away to see that there's a 4-leaf shamrock pinned to my shirt that they just about, their chins just about drag on the floor. And they all gather around. And then, I never had a speck of trouble from them after that, ever. And they would protect me out on the playground if any of the other kids wanted, because I had my Michigan ways and they had their California ways. And they helped me become a Californian. And so when I got home that night or afternoon, my mother was so thrilled. And she said, that is the most beautiful present from Mr. Jimmy. Would you like to preserve it? We'll keep it in water a few days and then we will press it. And you can keep it forever. And you can even have this little Bible that I was given, says my mom. I was given it when I was 10 and a half, like you. And people grow quickly. And there's only one other thing in it that's been pressed, and she opens it, and there is a flower, a beautiful flower that's beautifully flattened, that my dad gave to my mom on their first date. And she says, I think your shamrock queen is precious like that. So I put it in the Bible, and whatever happened to the Bible, after years of people coming and going, it had served its use, and it just probably went into fairy dust and floated off. And so my mother's birthday was 3 days ago. So I had been working on this story anyway, so I decided it would be very appropriate. And she would have been 111 on her birthday. So happy birthday, Mom. This is your present. And thank you very much.
Wow, that was a beautiful story.
Oh, thanks.
Why is it moms can have all these bad ideas, like painting freckles on your face, and then they get these brilliant ideas suddenly? It's just the way they are, I guess.
Yeah. And it is a true story. The dialogue has probably been rearranged because it was so long ago, and the freckles I think I just made up, but it is the sign of things she would have said.
Well, thank you so much, Elisheva.
Oops.
So our next teller for the evening is Sharon Elwell, right? We decided you were second, I think, right? I heard fourth, I heard second, but I think you're second. Anyway, good. I hope your granddaughter, is she here yet? Or
nope, I haven't seen or heard from her, so she'll just
well, she can
I'll
watch
tell it to her some other time.
the recording. We're recording.
Oh, that's right, it's being recorded. I'll tell her that. That'll be good. All right, this story, well, it's not like Elisheva's because it's not true, I don't think. It's about a woman who was unremarkable. There was nothing particular about her that stuck out in any way. She was the middle of 3 sisters, so she wasn't the oldest or the youngest. She wasn't the prettiest or the plainest. She wasn't the tallest or the smallest. She was just in the middle. And when they grew up, she lived in the middle as well. She was between one sister who lived to the north and another who lived in the south. And one day, this middle woman decided to pack up and go see those sisters. And so she fixed herself a pack and took her lunch and some other things and started up the road. And as she traveled, she hadn't gotten very far when suddenly, on the path right in front of her, was an enormous green dragon covered with golden scales. And she was too startled to say anything. But the dragon spoke, and he said, uh-oh, does this mean you can see me? And she said, well, of course I can see you. You're right in the middle of the road. And he said, this is not good. Under dragon rules and regulations, if you see me, I'm obliged to grant you 3 wishes. And she said, oh, don't bother with that. Just get out of the road so that I can go on my way and we'll be just fine. And he pulled himself to his full height and said, apparently, you do not understand the strictness of dragon rules and regulations. I must give you these 3 wishes and you must accept them. So she realized she wasn't going to get anywhere and without, so she stopped and thought very carefully, because a wish like that is something you don't make lightly. And she thought and thought for a long time, and finally she said, all right, I have my wish. I wish that from now on there will always be enough food for everyone in my family. And the dragon said, done, and disappeared. And a minute later, he was back. And he said, all right, your wish has been granted. And she said, how is that possible? How could you grant a wish like that so quickly? And he said, well, the fastest way to make sure there was always enough food for your family was to eliminate them. And so I have killed off everyone but you. And now I'm sure there will always be enough food. So now the middle woman realized that this business of having your wishes granted could be perilous and might not turn to your advantage. So when it came time to make her second wish, she thought even more carefully. And she pondered and pondered, and finally she said, all right, here's my second wish. I wish that everything would go back to exactly the way it was before I left the house this morning. And in a second it was done, and there she was, packing her bag. Only this time she unpacked it and decided not to take a chance on travel on that particular day. So the woman lived on, and she had a long and very adventurous life, and she had not used her third wish. And many times situations arose where she felt like she should use it. Some were very scary. There was the year that the rains didn't come and the crops didn't grow, and there was not enough food for everyone. And she thought she was going to have to rely on that wish. But then she remembered that her grandmother and her great-grandmother had known how to go into the woods and find things that were edible. And so she packed up her children and grandchildren and took them into the woods, and they looked for leaves that could be boiled into teas and nuts and berries and seeds. And they didn't eat well, but they did survive until the government arrived with a shipment of food supplies. So she didn't use the wish that year. And then there was the time that the house caught fire, and one of her grandchildren was inside. And she realized that this was the moment when she would have to use the wish. But then she thought, I could just take off my apron, soak it in this water that's here, tie it over my face, and I'm going to go in there and save that child myself, which she did. So once again, she didn't use the third wish. The third time was the scariest of all, because there was an enormous flood, and she found herself with a grandson on the roof as water went rushing by, and it was rising every minute, and it looked like they must surely perish. But her grandson grabbed a passing branch, and that gave her an idea. So they watched for another branch and another, and pretty soon she took the strings of that same apron and tied those branches together and fashioned something like a raft. They couldn't sit on it, but they held on to it and jumped off the roof onto that raft-like thing and floated on down the river to safety. And so she had many adventures in her long life, and she never used the third wish. And now she was on her deathbed, surrounded by the people that love her, and just about to say goodbye to everyone when the dragon showed up again. And she said, what are you doing here? And he said, apparently you don't understand the strictness of dragon rules and regulations. You must use your third wish. And if you fail to do so, I must die with you. So please use that wish and save my life. So there was nothing left for her to wish for. And she thought for a long time and finally says, all right, dragon, here's my final wish. I wish that every time you grant someone's wish, it will bring joy to them and to you as well. And with that, the middle woman fell peacefully to sleep.
Wow. That had
Lovely.
such a beautiful end to it.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, and for a while I was thinking the dragon should run the DMV or something. Stickler for all these rules. That was very beautiful. Sometimes we regret what we wish for, like with the King Midas stories, and that was really nice, Sharon. Thank you so much.
Yes.
And our next teller
Meg.
is going to be Meg. So let's welcome Meg to the Do Tell Zoom stage.
Hi, I'm not muted, am I? Everybody hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, all right, good. Tonight I'm going to do two smaller, I'm going to call them ditties. They're little poems. And so hopefully they will hang together, but they'll be fun. The first one is an old poem called The Fairies by William Allington. And I have to believe that he wrote this a long time ago because there are some things that are pretty antiquated. And so I will admit that I have edited this and kind of recreated it in a certain way, but I think it stays true to what William wrote way back when. Up the airy mountain, down the rushy glen, we daren't go a-hunting for fear of little men. We men, brave men, trooping all together, green cap, red cap, green cap, and a white owl's feather. Down along the rocky shore, some make their home, living on crispy pancakes made of yellow sea foam. Others in the reeds of the Black Mountain Lake keep frogs for their watchdogs all night awake. They stole little Bridget for 7 years long, and when she came home again, all her friends were gone. They took her back lightly between the morn and the morrow. They thought she was fast asleep, but she had died of sorrow. And so they've kept her ever since, deep within the lake, on a bed of plane leaves, watching till she wakes. If you see a green, if you see a green little ring underneath an oak, that's the fairies' dance floor. I'm sorry, I'm nervous. If you see a green little ring underneath an oak, that's the secret dance floor of the fairy folk. Underneath the full moon, dancing round and round to the crickets' music, dancing to and fro. If they catch you spying, hid behind a tree, they will fill your eyes with fairy dust so you cannot see. Up the airy mountain, down the rushy glen, we daren't go a-hunting for fear of little men. We men, brave men, trooping all together, red cap, green jacket, and a white owl's feather. Oh, sorry, guys. Just feeling a little nervous and not remembering it all, but that's the fairies. The second one is actually a song that I heard from a friend of mine when I was in high school. And it addressed one of those things that many of us experienced in our youth and throughout our lives sometimes. And it was a little ditty written by Dr. Seuss. So it's called Hungry. Hungry, hungry, I am hungry. Table, table, here I come. I could eat a goose moose burger, 15 pickles and a purple plum. I could eat 3 bowls of goulash, half a pound of wuzzled wheat. I could eat a peck of poobers. Then I'd really get to work and eat. Oysters, noodles, strawberries, strudels, French fries, fish hash, 1 red beet, lamb chops, wham chops, huckleberry mishmash. Oh, the things that I could eat. Donuts, dumplings, blueberry bumplings, chocolate mishmash, super sweet. Clam stew, wham stew, watermelon whoosh whoosh. Oh, the stuff that I could eat. Deep dish rhubarb, upside down cake. I could eat a frittered plum. Hungry, hungry, I am starving. Table, 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 here I come.
Oh, lovely.
So that was a funny one.
Those
Great.
Yeah,
are wonderful.
and nice voice. You got a very nice voice,
Yeah.
Meg. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Great, Meg. I like
Good.
the crispy pancakes of sea foam.
It's a beautiful, it is really a beautiful poem. I just love the wording he
it's
gets for it. Yeah.
amazing. And they have that topped with a goose moose burger then.
My little grandson just loves that song. I think he's going to have it memorized by the time in just a couple of weeks, I'm sure.
Love the solitary presence of 1 red beet right in the middle of the whole thing. Oh,
Yeah.
Meg, thank you so much. That was really beautiful. Let's see. And if we look at our list, I believe Nicolene is next, and it's her birthday.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, well, will be better if you didn't know, but anyway, that's it. Okay, so this story takes place a few years after the end of World War II in France. More precisely, in the city of Lisieux, situated in Normandy. Because this part of the country had been heavily bombed during the war, housing is very scarce. A young couple, Simone and Lucien, with 2 children, are living in a 2-room apartment. The bedroom is so small that the 3 beds touch each other. The other room is used for preparing meals and eating. The only furniture are a table, 4 chairs, a hutch, and a stove for cooking and heating the place. That's all. There is a sink, but no running water. They have to get their water at a public pump across the street. There is no toilet, and even less a shower. They have to use a potty and wash themselves at the sink. Once a week, the children, who are 3 and 4 years old, have a bath in a big metal tub, which requires several trips to the pump to fill up. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. Of course, some water is heated on the stove to make for a warm bath. It's April, and they are expecting a baby anytime. They are very poor. There is no health insurance at the time, and women still give birth at home. Finally, in the middle of the night, Simone is starting to have contraction. Lucien grabs his bike and goes to fetch his mother, who lives a few miles away on the other side of the city. While she makes her way to the home by bike, in the cold and under the rain, that Normandy in spring, cold and raining, Lucien goes to look for the midwife. And fortunately, when he gets there, she's already gone somewhere else. Meanwhile, in the apartment, the grandmother had to get some water at the pump and put it on the stove to prepare for the birth. Then she put a blanket and some towels on the table so Simone can give birth there and not wake up the children asleep in the bedroom. It is also a way to spare the bed linen, since all of the laundry is done by hand at the river, which runs behind the building. Finally, Lucien is back home and goes to the bedroom to keep an eye on the children. And at that time, men will never assist to a childbirth. That was a woman's business. The contractions are getting closer and closer. Finally, at about 6 a.m., the baby comes out and the grandmother has to deal with it because the midwife has not arrived yet. So this is how, on a cold and rainy day, April 13, 1949, I was born on the kitchen table. Even though I was there, I forgot a lot of details. So my grandma filled me in, and this is how I can tell you the story today.
Oh,
That's great.
Well, some of you have heard that story before.
beautiful.
I told it several years ago.
Oh, Nicoline, that was so beautiful.
Thank you.
Well, we
But-
are so glad you're here to share that with us, and
Yeah,
happy birthday to you.
thank you.
So I believe next on our list, I see my name, but I have
No, it's Genevieve.
right. So I was gonna say, I believe that we'll go right to Genevieve, and she is right here. Welcome to the Zoom Do Tell stage.
Hi, thank you. Oops, hold on a second. So, this is a story, and if you want, I'll add the little epilogue at the end, very short. It's personal narrative and fairy tale wrapped into one. Y luego que pasó, Juanjo? And then what happened, Jan Jan? I was 4, and my brother, all of 9, was sitting on the bed telling me a story as he had every evening since I'd come back from the hospital. We had moved to this country only a few weeks earlier. I would be bedridden for days after the surgeries, looking wan and scraggly, with owies and angst. But after we moved here, my siblings were left to learn English and the intricacies of a new culture, while by the sink or swim method, while I was whisked across Texas to a renowned hospital in Houston, where I received surgery and treatment for what would turn out to be the first of many tumors that year after year after year threatened to claim my life. For some reason, it was my brother, Johnny, who took on the role of storyteller during my convalescence, weaving tales that would lift me out of my reality into a special world of his imaginings. I would sit in rapt attention, in my little pajamas with little printed animals, listening to him, propped up by pillows, my hair cut short, patches of gauze covering the scars on my face, with my arms wrapped around the stuffed tigers, which I would not be parted from for love or money. He would start. Once upon a time, there was a beautiful princess who lived in a faraway land. And then he would have her weave her way across forests and hills and dales, meeting princes and paupers and knights and knaves. Sometimes there would be a fierce fire-breathing dragon that would appear. And then the Knight of Hearts would come. And then what happened? Johnny echoed my question. Why, the Knight of Hearts appeared on his magnificent stallion, wearing a knight's armor with a heart-shaped crest on the breastplate. And pushing his silver lance forward, he fearlessly galloped and chased the dragon away. Oh, my dear knight, the grateful princess exclaimed. I want you to stay with me forever. And the knight replied, I will, sweet princess, but not in the way that you think. There will come a time when you won't see me anymore. But on that day, you will find the strength to ward away dragons on your own. And with that, he took the heart-shaped crest off of his breastplate, gave it to the princess, and said, know that we will never part every time you touch this heart. And so it continued. As I turned 5 and 6 and 7 and 8. One day when I was 9, I asked him again to tell me a story. He was hedging. Come on, John, tell me a story. Okay, all right, hold on, just a minute. Once upon a time, there was a little girl who wanted her brother to tell her a story. And this is the story he told. I leaned forward, excited to hear the rest of the story. Tigers flying across the bed covers. He went on. Once upon a time, there was a little girl who wanted her brother to tell her a story. And this is the story he told. Go on, John, I said. Tell the story. I am. Hold on, here goes. Once upon a time, there was a little girl who wanted her brother to tell her a story. And this is the story he told. Knock it off, John, that's not the story. Jan, it is. Listen. Once upon a time, there was a little girl who wanted her brother to tell her a story. Oh, I get it. I get it, John. Okay. You see, by that time, I was 9, but my brother was 14. And like the Knight of Hearts, he had other damsels in distress to rescue. It was hard. But by then, reality had to come into my life. And I was ready for it at last. So I bit my lip, summoned up my courage, and with these words, I let him go. Night, night, my night. Good night, princess, said he.
Very nice.
Epilogue. So our story had come to its natural conclusion. But the tale had a happy ending. The spell was broken. I never had another tumor again.
Mm.
Maybe it was the surgery or the treatment. My mother will swear it was 1,001 votive candles to St. Jude, the patron saint of hopeless cases. But me, I believe it was the power of a heart-shaped crest. Today, my brother tells tales to the children of his own children, who sit mesmerized, I'm sure, as he lifts them like I was lifted out of reality into a special world of his imagining. And so it is that the stories of our lives make a circle of love which holds us and heals us and makes us one. And so it is that we live happily ever
It's amazing.
Very nice.
That is just amazing.
Yeah, and you
Oh, beautiful.
yeah, you say it so nicely too.
Wow.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
Genevieve, that was very magical. Your
Mhm.
voice is so musical too, and there were such wonderful pauses in there.
Yeah.
That was a real treat for us.
Thank you.
A circle of love. What a great way to end.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be with y'all.
Oh.
We love your story.
So it's about time that I think we take a short break. Katie, do you agree? And Meg, do you agree? We can.
could, if you wanted to, and then when we come back, after we do you want to tell, or do you want to tell yours now, Brandon?
Either way is fine. I could do it now. Yeah.
Shall we do it now, and then we'll do us?
Yeah. And then we'll do the circle, and then we'll have time for maybe a longer story after that.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
That sounds great. So this is part of a longer story, and it's already a little bit longer than it should be for our swap. So it's probably about 8 or 9 minutes. We're coming up on, well, we passed a year of social distance learning, and we are actually in hybrid learning now. And by the end of April in Sonoma County, we'll be able to have all of our students present, which is really nice. And so I've been creating a story about distance learning to celebrate a year of it, to celebrate the ending of a year of it. So I remember now, it's more than a year ago, the first time I turned on my Zoom classroom. And you can imagine there were 20 brightly lit squares with the smiling faces of my students all looking back at me, their names in their lower left-hand corner, kind of like our swap, right? And I took attendance, everyone was there, all were accounted for, and I started teaching. But about 8 minutes into the lesson, someone joined our class. We had a mysterious visitor. They didn't turn their camera on, and all you could see was a dark Zoom square with the word in capital letters, CHUD, C-H-U-D, CHUD. Can I help you? I asked, and Chud remained eerily silent. My students began firing questions in the chat. Who's Chud? And some people thought they knew, and there were all this flurry of comments and answers and things. Can you turn your camera on? I said, and Chud remained eerily silent. Can you hear us? Can you put something in the chat? At this point, one of my students had Googled the word Chud, and found that it was a reference. The first thing that came up was a reference to a 70s horror film. And CHUD was an acronym for Cannibalistic Human Eating Underground Dwellers. And in the trailer of this, it looked like there were these helpless people walking on streets, and they would hear something and say, hello? Is somebody there? And something would come out of a manhole, drag them into the sewer, and tear them to pieces. And of course, this did nothing to dispel the growing suspicion that this is exactly what the administration had warned me about, that this could be a Zoom bomber. And so I apologized and I said to CHUD, I have to remove you. And I did. The thing was, CHUD kept coming back. He came back the next day, and I began to unceremoniously just eject CHUD, and to the grateful cheers of my students, CHUD denied, CHUD given the boot, flushed down the drain where he belongs. The creepy thing about CHUD was, I think, how bad his connection was. It made us think he was zooming from the top of a mountain. And someone said, no, it's just West County. And everybody laughed. But then someone said, maybe he's zooming from the sewer. And nobody laughed. Well, things came to a head during my office hours. This is where I open up a Zoom room and students can come in independently to get extra help. I hadn't expected anybody and I was reading. And then when I looked up, twinkling shamelessly in the Zoom room, right next to my Zoom box, was CHUD. Without an audience of students, I was much bolder. All right, CHUD, I said, what do you want? What, are you some kind of bully? Are you some kind of weirdo, CHUD? And then I said, get out of here, you jerk. And with a flourish, I ejected CHUD from my office hours. Now, this is where, if it were a horror movie, the music would get heavier, more suspenseful. This is the part where the main character has been wandering through the woods, only to find they've come right back to where they started. This is where the hero lops the head off the monster, only to find two more grow back, or the main character hides in the closet, only to find the killer is right behind them in the closet. For reasons I still don't really understand, but I've seen since. When I ejected CHUD, because of their bad connection, they were leaving the meeting, but also rejoining. Well, the effect was that shimmering threateningly in my office hours were now two CHUDs. Two CHUDs. I remember looking at my computer screen like I was watching a horror movie. There was my Zoom square with myself looking back, helplessly, full of terror. And on either side of me, flickering menacingly, flanking me like two predators that were going to bring me down and rip me to pieces, were CHUDs. I fumbled for the mouse, but then I started groping around the desk for concrete objects, weapons. And what I came up with was a spirit horn from the San Francisco Giants ballpark. You use them to cheer the Giants on. Well, I grabbed that thing and gave a sputtering prelude, and then 3 sonic blasts from the horn. And CHUD was gone. I caught my breath. My confidence slowly returned that I could successfully defend the sanctity of my classroom. But my triumph was short-lived because something different entered my office hours. The camera was on And although the person was muted, I could tell they were furious. Their mouth, because of a bad connection, was caught frozen in a series of expressions of outrage and fury. It was a woman with a shower cap and a bathrobe on. And at one point, she ripped the shower cap off with no small amount of hair from which dangled one of the hair curlers and hurled it right at the camera. In the lower left, I caught the name, California Housing and Urban Development, which is the correct expansion of the acronym CHUD. But what had I done to make this woman so angry? And by extension, the office of the California Housing and Urban Development. My horror turned to confusion and then to total disorientation. I fumbled for the mouse. I picked up the horn and put it back down, and then I just went for the plug. I ripped the cord of my desktop out of the wall, ending my office hours, ending the Zoom call, cutting power to my computer completely, and I wasn't going back on until somebody cleared this up. The Dean of Students did. Chud was one of our students. He had been given the wrong Zoom link. He had a terrible Wi-Fi connection. His father worked for the Office of Housing and Urban Development, and he was using his father's account. And of course, after I repeatedly ejected him, shouted at him, and then blasted him with a horn, he had become more and more anxious and distressed, at which point his mother had stepped in. Well, Chud, who has a real name, was given the correct link to the class. Of course, our IT director helped with the Wi-Fi. And needless to say, I wrote letters, I phoned, I apologized multiple times, and the family most graciously accepted my apology. Now, a year later, as I turn on Zoom classrooms, most of my students have their cameras off. They say, oh, I have a bad Wi-Fi connection, but I know what they're doing. They're microwaving mac and cheese. They're snuggling under the covers. Most of them have written all sorts of outrageous things in place of their names. Anime characters, SpongeBob. I have one who calls himself the Grim Reaper. Thank God we're moving to hybrid classrooms and eventually back to in-person learning. About a month ago, I did a materials pickup. That's where families come and get photocopies, packets of photocopies, science, experiment kits, ceramics tools. My shift was from 3 to 6 p.m. and most of the materials had been picked up by 6 p.m., but I noticed one science kit remained. The name rang a bell, but it wasn't one of my students. At about 6:08, up pulled a little white pickup truck, screeched to a halt. Out jumped a woman wearing a mask who ran over apologizing and thanking me for waiting. And from the truck, a man called, "It was my fault, I just got off work." And that's when I read on the side of the truck, the California Housing and Urban Development Office. I stood up, "Chud!" I blurted, and then I corrected myself and I said the name of the student. Oh my goodness, she was putting it together. "Brandon," she said, and for a moment, there was a tense silence. Indeed, we had become monsters to one another on Zoom. Of course, in person, we saw right past that, and to my relief, she laughed and I laughed and she laughed some more, and our hands reached out. And I think if we weren't in this world of social distancing, we probably would have given each other a friendly hug. Well, that, among so many other things, we'll just have to wait for a little bit longer. Thank you.
Good story.
Lovely.
Well,
That's a good story.
So,
and you are such an actor, Brandon. I
oh,
mean, you're amazing.
sorry, my computer was kind of shaking around. I should.
That's great.
Um,
Brendan, I wonder how many people have been able to come up with a good story about distance learning.
Yeah.
I do too. I would like to hear some others, but I can't tell you how scared I was when there were two chuds. I just had no idea what was going on. I thought it was a psychopath. Did not know what to make of this, especially when
Yeah.
two of them appeared. Anyway, I think it's time for a short break. We'll do a 5-minute break. So it is exactly 8 o'clock now, and we
Yeah.
come back at 8:05 for our circle. There will be a
Very good.
prompt, and we will have some time for announcements. Katie, would you like to
Yeah.
do announcements before the circle or
Oh.
after the circle?
We could do it after the circle.
Yeah.
I think if Meg, I don't know if we have any announcements, but yeah, let's do the circle when we come back. That would be great.
Okay.
Very good. So I'll see everybody in 5, and I'll be pausing the recording. You're welcome to leave your cameras on, turn them off, whatever you want to do.
Oh,
Recording.
Okay.
Welcome back from the break to the Do Tell April story swap. And this is the part of our evening agenda where we have a little circle and we introduce ourselves. And every month we try to include a prompt so that each person attending can give a very short response to the prompt. And we like to try to keep these as lean as possible. This month, we've decided that we would like to share our first pet. And I heard Elaine talking about Mocha, is that right?
Yes.
Leads
My-
right into this week's or this month's prompt. So I will begin, and then I'll call people up one at a time, and hopefully, Katie, you can kind of keep track, but I think I have made a better way to keep track of people so that I don't miss them, because the names kind of shift around.
it's okay, yeah, because I've got a list too, so
Okay,
we
very
can
good.
together.
Thank
Yeah.
you. So my name is Brandon, and I am a high school teacher in Santa Rosa. I've been coming to the Do Tell Swap for probably 6 or 7 years, I think. And time is really flying. My first pet, there were 2. I was born, and my mom and dad already had a cat named Boo Radley and a huge German Shepherd female named Lollipop. The 2 did not get along. So the cat would come in the house at night and the dog would go out. And then during the day, we never even saw the cat. Katie knows a little bit about this cat because the other half of the story I'm telling involves this cat. So I am going to pass the circle to Debbie Downer. Let me find you, and I will.
Hi, I'm Debbie. Deb Downer. Debbie Downer, if you will.
Debbie Downer.
My first pet was a family pet. There was a stray cat, a big silver tabby tomcat, who wandered through our backyard. All the kids were playing with it. They threw blankets over it, and the cat would run like a ghost, bouncing up and down across the backyard. And that cat became one of my best friends. And I'm very grateful that it came into my life when I was 7 years old and 8 years old, and kept it till we were I was about 9, but there's nothing like a pet sometimes when nobody will, listen to you when when you got your brother angry about something or sister. There's always the cat. Wonderful animal. And his name was not Good Luck. It was called Jinx. That was his first name. That was a cat on TV who got into trouble a lot. I guess we named it Jinx, but he was good luck to me.
Thank you, Debbie.
I will pass it to Elizabeth. You got one? Yeah. Another Michigan.
Yay.
Yeah.
Okay. We lived across from the 17th hole of the Ann Arbor golf course. I moved there when I was 2 with my family. And a farm collie that was on the other side of where I lived. There was all these farms, and because it was in the early 1940s, they had to go back to using horses for hauling things and for plowing because they didn't have the gas to use machinery. So they did have active working farms, like really close. And there was this farm collie that paroled all the farms to make sure everybody was okay. And she knew that we were not farmers, so she really hung around us to take care of us, because collies are really, she was a farm collie, not that big straight nose, but a really nice dish nose. So she was sort of our pet. And then I got a pet of my own. And it was I think probably black and white, but I can't remember, or sort of a gray tiger kind of pattern. And it was my very own. And I named her Twinkle Toes because there was a radio program called The Adventures of Mr. Keene. And he was some sort of detective, and his theme song on the radio was "Someday I'll find you, someday I'll find you." And at that little age, young age of 3 or 4, it didn't really register what all was happening, but there was a ballerina that came on it, and her name was Twinkle Toes. So that's how I got the name for my kitty. And I don't ever remember what happened to the cat. I know I had it. We moved after a few years, so probably didn't make the move.
Great. Thank you, Ellie Shiva.
You're
And
welcome.
let's go to Elaine.
Oh, yeah. What is this one? Okay. My father was in the Air Force, so for a long time, my parents wouldn't let us get a pet because we were moving every 2 years. But the first dog I remember getting was in Texas. We had a dog from the pound, Heinz 57. He was all black and sort of medium sized, small, on the small side. And we just called him Blackie. And at that time, dogs ran loose in the neighborhood, and he came in at night, slept in the house, or we'd usually chain him up in the backyard. We were in Texas then. And it's funny because one day my mother said, "Did you hear that howling last night?" And they were talking, we have coyotes around here or something. And the next night we all stayed up kind of late, and we heard this howl. And it would go on for like 5 minutes before it even tailed off. And it turns out it was our dog. She was howling at the moon.
Oh, oh. Wow, Elaine, that was a nice little gem of a story.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
when we moved from Texas, we had to get rid of her. And
Mhm.
so it was, we lost our animals. I didn't get a real pet until I left home.
Well, let's pass it to Gay. Hi, Gay.
You're muted.
She's not muted. Interesting.
Is she muted herself?
No, can you hear me?
Yes.
Now.
Now we
Now
can.
we can.
it was a family dog. That was my first pet, and he was a very everybody had a time to take turns to take him for walks, and it was your turn, then there was another kid's turn and everything. And we always knew when the person who didn't take their turn or wasn't on time taking the dog for a walk, because he'd go pee on your bed.
Oh,
And it wasn't a random peeing on people's bed. It was specifically the person who didn't take him for his timely walk. It was a very big statement.
that is cool.
At first we couldn't figure it out, but then we realized, I mean, because the person that didn't take him or didn't do it on the right time didn't want to admit it. So it had to be figured out. That's why the bed got peed on.
Oh, that's funny.
Anyway, it was,
Smart.
That's
One
quite-
smart dog.
oh yeah, or he was smart in a lot of ways.
Thank you, Gay. And let's pass it to Genevieve.
I love these prompts because they bring such wonderful memories back. I thought my first pet was a cat, gotten to the protestations of my mother, but out of compassion for my state recovering from surgery. But no, my first pets were 3 turtles. They were family pets before we moved to the United States. So I remember being around 3 in the small patio of our typical Mexican house and being surprised because all of a sudden, little nose would poke out and there would be a turtle. And in reflecting, I'm remembering what it felt like to put my little hands on its shell, which is so smooth and ridgy at the same time, and how it would duck inside its shell when I would get close to its head. Those memories of just the turtles bring back a whole vision of my whole little tiny 4 years of life in Guadalajara. When we came to the United States, my older sister, who was considerably older than I was and very much the grown-up, tried to replicate the effort by buying those Woolworths turtles that you bought. They were teeny tiny ones. They were mass produced, and the things were not made to be raised in the desert. And time after time, my turtles would crawl out of their little plastic mini environment, go out the sliding glass door, and proceed to get kicked over or turned over, and I would find their little white shells upside down days later. And yet nobody ever caught on that all we needed to do was give them a better terrarium. Go figure. Kind of like transplanting us to this country.
That's quite an analogy.
It is.
So let's pass it to Katie Mangan.
I love cats, and we had a family cat, and it was beautiful. It was a ginger cat, and a very unimaginative name. We called it Ginger, and I just loved it, and it lived to a ripe old age. Yeah.
Very good. And next we have Meg.
Unmute myself. Okay. We had always had so many pets in my family. They just collected them all. We have 4 kids and 2 parents, and they all collected pets. But my first pet that I remember that was mine exclusively was a hamster, of course. A hamster named Jingles, who unfortunately, like many hamsters, escaped from her cage and came to a terrible end by being squished between the door and the wall. But for the time that I had little Jingles, I was so happy as a little girl. I thought that was wonderful. Poor Jingles.
Jingle. Next we have Nicolene.
Well, in our first house where I was born, was so small, was no way my parents wanted a pet in addition to 3 kids. But after we moved, then we did have a little dog, which was a Lulu the Pomeranian. I don't know what's that in English, but it was the same dog that they sent in the space. And we call it Laika because that was the name you may remember. Those, that little dog. Anyway, La Laika. So I don't remember too many details, but all I know, it ended up to be passed over on the street where we live. And after that, we had a cat, which we didn't have very long either because he get passed over as well. Then my mother didn't want us to have any more pet because each time I will cry the pet death, you know. So what I did get, because my mother had rabbit and they also raised guinea pig. She raised guinea pig to eat.
Oh,
Yeah, in
yeah.
France we eat guinea pig, you know, I feel, or maybe hamster, is that the same word? Guinea pig, hamster, I don't know. Anyway, my mother agreed to let me have one as a pet. So, and that one, I made sure it didn't get killed and eaten, and I will never eat a hamster or guinea pig, no way. So that's it about
Yes,
pets.
with enough butter and garlic in France, right? Everything good, right?
Yeah, well, in France, when I grew up, we eat horses, we eat rabbit, but and guinea pig. But anyway, not mine, not mine. We bury it in the garden.
Thank you, Nicolene. And we have 2 more according to my list. Sharon.
Oh, the thing about this topic is all my pet stories are tragic. They always, that, And my very first pet was one of the kind of little turtles that Genevieve talked about that you get at the carnival or someplace. And our dog bit its head off, and I had nightmares about that for, oh gosh, the longest time. So I don't want to talk about pets.
In a lot of ways, I think pets really are the ones who teach us as young people that lesson about death.
About death. I
Amazing.
think so too.
Yeah. Thank you, Sharon. You're always funny, and yet there's this gravitas there too. And I think the last person is Vina, but Katie can correct me if I'm
There's
wrong.
one more after Vina.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so when we when I was little, we lived in Las Molinas, which is up in Red Bluff, the Sacramento Valley. And it was a hot climate. And so I was fascinated by these little bugs called doodle bugs. I don't know if you guys know them now. So they form a cone that's maybe this big around in soft, dry dirt. And they form the cone by flicking the dirt out until finally this little cone has been created. And they live because when an ant comes along, and they're also called ant lions. When an ant comes along and gets stuck in this volcano of loose sand, and it's struggling to get out, and the doodle bug is flicking sand up, up, up in order to make this ant stay in its space until finally a little leg of the ant gets down there and the doodle bug grabs it, pulls it down, eats it. Well, I was just charmed by these creatures. So I had a doodle bug farm. Whenever I'd find one on our property or somebody else's property, I would carefully dig down underneath the doodle bug, bring it home to this little place next to the wood box, which had nice dry dirt, and establish my little doodle bug farm. And then I'd have to go and find ants and bring them over and drop them into the vicinity of the doodle bugs. that was pretty fun and exciting. And I don't really know if I was probably 7 or something like that. My family, my dad had hunting dogs and they weren't really very interesting pets for us kids.
Now, can you imagine the evolutionary process that resulted in this animal? It's just amazing. They
Spoken like a teacher, Brandon.
Education.
Katie, who have I met?
Elsie Smith still here with us?
No, that's my granddaughter, and I think she took off. I don't.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there was a Smith that joined, and she missed your story too, didn't she?
She did. We can live with that. She got to hear yours. So.
Okay.
Well, let's see.
I
Yay.
don't have any announcements, but maybe Meg does. I'm not sure.
Did Gay talk about her any pets?
Yes.
I have to
David.
apologize because I don't have all the details. I will, next time I will definitely bring all the flyers, but we do have the Free Folk Festival coming up in June. And is it the 16th or I don't remember, but it is posted on our website. So, or it will be, so you can look it up there. Also, there's the genre telling event that is a history stories, and Sharon's going to be telling a story there. And then there's the liars contest with Miss Elaine going to be featured there. So there are 3 things, and just, check out the website and you'll get all the details, how to, when it is and how to get onto these. And hey, Brandon, do you know if the folk festival will have, it says you should register, and do you know if it's going to have a limit?
No limit.
No limit.
And the registration is not active yet. It's June
Oh.
13 is the day.
Okay.
And the way they're doing it this year, they will have one gigantic Zoom meeting. And then you sign up in the breakout room for the event you want. So you just join the Storytelling Association of California breakout room. And it starts at 12 noon on June 13. That's June 12. That's a Saturday, June 12. And it goes all the way to 6 o'clock. It will start out with, I believe it's, let's see, I might have the order wrong, but Ed Lewis is doing a genre tales event where there will be one example from each genre: folk tales, personal tales, scary stories, tall tales. He'll have one teller representing each of those historical tales. And then we have the Southern California Showcase, which is kind of neat. And that is Marilyn McPhee hosting with Tina Tomayana from San Diego, both of them, and they're choosing specifically Southern California tellers. And that's really nice because SAC is so Northern California oriented. So that's a really nice dash of Southern California style to the day. We have Silk, which is stories in living color, and that will be paired people of color with white tellers. And then there is one pair that is, I think there's an Asian teller paired with an African-American teller. And the idea is they work together, they each develop a story, but they develop a relationship with each other too, and they learn from each other. And finally, there is the Jenny Fund. And these are SAC storytellers who go into the classroom and do assemblies, into the school, I should say, and do assemblies. And this year, there's been a series of assemblies for 5th grade at a public school in San Jose. And so a bunch of those tellers are going to tell the story that they told at the school assembly and talk about the value of storytelling in public schools. So that's the whole program, June 12, noon to 6. Very good. Anything else, Meg?
Muted.
I'm having a terrible time today, I think.
Oh, that's okay.
You know, that's really the things that I'm aware of at this point. Yeah.
Yeah,
But like I say, anybody who does know of a storytelling event that's happening, please email me. I'd be glad to put it up on the website so that people will have that information to follow through on.
that's great.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So I think at this point, we have at least one more story. It's a longer story, and it's going to be told by Katie. Is that correct?
Great.
Yes, and I think Elaine has a story too.
Very good.
Do you want to go after me, Elaine, or before me?
Yeah, that way if your story goes to the end.
Oh, it won't go to the end.
Okay, well, let's see how much time we have when you finish.
Okay. You may remember that at the last swap, I told you a story about Rose and how she was selected by the bees to be the chosen one, which meant that she would receive the shamanic wisdom and knowledge from her great grandmother, Eleanor. And I believe that the women of the community breathed a sigh of relief that it was Rose and not her elder sister, Raven, because Raven was quite different from Rose. Raven was 6 years older than Rose. She was very independent. She was strong-willed. She could be aggressive. There was a fear that she might, at some point, dabble in the dark arts, in black magic. And I have a story that I want to tell you about Raven, so you can kind of understand the kind of young woman she is, or she was. They lived near the deep woods, which is a magical and mysterious forest. And when Raven was a young woman, she had decided to be a guardian, or she called herself a gatekeeper of part of that forest, and she looked after it. So there were two brothers, Eric and Paul, and they were hunters, and they were very, very good hunters. And they would go out and they'd come back with lots of game, lots of meat. And then they would tell a story about the hunt. And sometimes the stories were so fantastical that people began to wonder if, in fact, they were true. And in the end, and the stories also, they were always so full of themselves, you know, they were just so great. And their family and friends, in the end, decided not to listen to the stories anymore. And the two men were furious. And they decided that they would have what they called an epic day of hunting. And they would go out and they would get so much game. They'd come back and there would be a tremendous feast. And they would tell the story of the hunt. And it would be the story of the century. Well, the night before the day of the epic hunt, Eric talked to his wife and said, "Betty, when I'm gone tomorrow hunting, I want you to clean the house till it's spotless. And when I come back, I expect all the vegetables to be prepared because we shall have so much meat, we'll have to invite all the neighbors in for a grand feast, and then I'll tell the story of the hunt." Well, Betty was furious because she always kept the house spotless. And it was Billy, their eldest son, who said, "Don't worry, Mum. Us kids will help you clean the house as we always do. We'll help with the vegetables too." Betty smiled. "Billy, after we've finished our chores, we'll make a picnic lunch and then we'll go down to the river and you can fish." Now, Billy was becoming quite the fisherman. He had hoped to become a hunter like his father. But his father and his uncle, Paul, unlike anybody else, they would not share their knowledge or their skills. They wouldn't pass it on. So the morning of the epic hunt arrived, and Eric and Paul left when it was still dark. They had heard of a new hunting ground It was some miles away from the village. But the story was that there were these game birds that were so fat, they could hardly fly. There's a good story there. They went to find out. So they walked in the dark, and when they got to the hunting ground, it wasn't yet light. It was that magical betwixt and between time when the light was just seeping back into the sky. And they sat on the ground and they leaned against a tree trunk and they had something to eat and they watched the sun rise. And then when it was light, they got up and began to walk through the fields. And as they were walking, they heard the most beautiful song. And they became quite entranced by this. And they followed the song. And they took no notice of where they were going. And they left the fields and they went into the woods. They went into the deep woods, the mysterious and magical forest. And the song led them into a clearing. And in the clearing, there was a big grandmother tree, very old. And sitting on one of the lowest branches was a beautiful young woman. She had long black hair, black lacy dress, very stylish black boots. And she was singing her song and throwing corn on the ground. And the ground was covered with these big fat partridges and pheasants. Well, Eric and Paul could not believe their eyes. This is a good story. And they called out to Raven, "What's your name?" "My name is Raven." "And who are you?" she asked. We're just hunters." "Hungry hunters," added Paul. Now, they were quite some way away from her, but she looked at them very carefully. "You don't look hungry to me. I can see the crumbs on your shirt and your jacket." They wondered, how could she see that? "Don't you know," she said, "that you're in the deep woods? There's a law against hunting." But they just laughed it off. They turned their back on her and they began to talk about how they were going to catch, kill these birds. And they took off their crossbow, their bow and arrow, and just threw it on the ground. "Well, we won't need this." And then they thought about their hunting knife. "Oh, we won't need that. We'll need the nets." And they discussed how they would throw the nets and how many birds they would get. "I'm going to get 8. Oh, I'll get 12. Just as they were about to throw the net over the birds, there was this spine-chilling sound. "Ah!" And they turned, and to their horror, Raven was transforming in front of their very eyes. Her stylish black boots had changed into razor-sharp talons. Her black hair and her black lacy dress was moving into feathers. Her beautiful face now had a huge, cruel beak on it. And as she raised her arms, they became wings. And with 3 beats of the wings, she started to fly towards them. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. They were terrified. They dropped their nets and began to run as fast as they could. With grace and ease, Raven just picked up those nets in her talons and flew after them. And when she was above them, she just dropped the nets and they fell down onto the fleeing men. They kept running,
But they became more and more entangled in the nets until in the end, they just couldn't move. Raven then got hold of the nets and began to drag them along the forest floor, through the dead leaves and the broken branches. They were becoming bloodied and bruised. She dragged them through bushes. She dragged them through trees, through the treetops, till finally they were out of the deep woods. And she was taking them over the fields. And as they got to the field where they had stopped and had their breakfast, she just let them go. And they fell to the ground with a thud. They lay on the ground, moaning and groaning. They realized finally that they hadn't broken any bones. They'd lost all their hunting gear except for their hunting knife. And they used their knife to cut themselves free out of the nets, thus destroying the net. And they just sat there rubbing themselves and wondering how long it will take them to walk home and what kind of story are they going to be able to tell. Well, back in the village, Betty and the children had finished cleaning the house and they were gathering the vegetables together. Something had caught Betty's eye and she went out into the back garden. And there was this bird, a very big raven, it looked like, just flying around, singing and cawing as ravens do, just full of joy and life and doing cartwheels and all these acrobatics. And she smiled, watching it. And then she went back to the house and said, "Children, I think that's enough vegetables. I have this feeling that your father isn't bringing home any meat tonight. Let's make a picnic. We'll go to the river." And so they did. And at the river, Billy caught several fish. And just before they left, he caught a beautiful big trout. And so on the way home, Billy gave the smaller fish to the neighbors. And they went home and they cooked up this fish with the vegetables. Now they had just sat down to dinner when at the door appeared a man that the children didn't recognize until he spoke. "You've started eating without me." Betty stood up. "Eric, your clothes are filthy, and so are you. The house is spotless. You will not come inside. Billy, get your father some clean clothes. Go and clean yourself up." When Billy was handing Eric his clothes, he leaned in. "Billy, get me some dinner. Won't you, son, huh?" "Oh, Dad, I'll have to ask Mum first." Well, Eric finally cleaned himself up and came back into the house. There at his place at the table was a plate with the tail end of the fish and a few vegetables. He sat down with a sigh, and he was about to speak, and Betty spoke first. "Eric, don't interrupt, please. Billy is telling us one of his fishing stories. Go on, Billy." Well, needless to say, Eric and Paul never went hunting again. They never told another story. And if they ever saw a raven or a bird that looks like a raven, they went and hid. Billy continued to be a good fisherman, in fact, an excellent fisherman. And he mentored many, many people. And Raven, oh, Raven, she just continued to live her life in her own unique and very magical way. Blessings and abundance to you all.
Good story.
Wow. That was really, really magical, Katie. Thank you for that. It's always nice when you're near the end because I swear your stories have a impact on what I dream. I really mean that. So I think we have time for Elaine.
We
Is
do.
that we do?
Okay, I
Very
thought
good.
I'd do a literary recitation of the ballad of the face on the barroom floor. Mostly because I haven't done it in a long time and I want to see if I remember it. Okay. 'Twas a balmy summer evening, and a goodly crowd was there, which well nigh filled Joe's barroom in the corner of the square. And as songs and witty stories came through the open door, a vagabond crept slowly in and posed upon the floor. Where did it come from? Someone said. The wind has blown it in. What does it want? Another cried. Some whiskey, rum, or gin? Here, Toby, sick 'em. See if your stomach will do the work. I wouldn't touch him with a fork. He's filthy as a Turk. This badinage the poor wretch took with stoical good grace. In fact, he smiled, as though he thought he'd struck the proper place. Come, boys, I know there's kindly hearts among so good a crowd. Why, to be in such good company would make a deacon proud. Give me a drink. That's what I want. I'm out of funds, you know, but when I had the cash to treat the gang, this hand was never slow. What? You laugh as if you thought this pocket never held a sou. I once was fixed as well, my boys, as any one of you. There, thanks. You treated me mighty kindly, and I'd like to tell you how I came to be the dirty sot you see before you now. As I told you once, I was a man with muscle, frame, and health. But for a blunder, I'd have made considerable wealth. For I was a painter, oh, not one that daubed on bricks and wood, but an artist, and for my age was rated pretty good. I worked hard at my canvas and was bidden fair to rise, for gradually I saw the star of fame before my eyes. I made a picture, perhaps you've seen, 'tis called The Chase of Fame. It brought me £1,500 and added to my name, and then I met a woman. Now comes the funny part, with eyes that petrified my brain and sunk into my heart. Why don't you laugh? 'Tis funny that the vagabond you see could ever love a woman and expect her love for me, but 'twas so, and for a month or two her smiles were freely given, and when her loving lips touched mine, it carried me to heaven. Boys, did you ever see a girl for whom your soul you'd give, with a form like the Milo Venus, too beautiful to live, with eyes that sparkled like diamonds, and welts of chestnut hair? If so, 'twas she, for there never was another half so fair. Well, I was working on a portrait one afternoon in May of a fair-haired boy, a friend of mine who lived across the way. And Madeline admired him, and much to my surprise, she said she'd like to know the man that had such dreamy eyes. Well, it didn't take long to know him, and before the month had flown, my friend had stole my darling, and I was left alone. And near a year of misery had passed above my head, and the jewel I had treasured so had tarnished and was dead. That's why I took the drink, boys. Why, I never saw you smile. I thought you'd be amused and laughing all the while. What's the matter, friend? There's a teardrop in your eye. Come and laugh. Laugh like me. 'Tis only babes and women that should cry. Say, if you give me enough whiskey, I'd be glad to draw right here a picture of the face that drove me mad. Give me that chalk with which you mark the baseball score, and you shall see the lovely Madeline upon the barroom floor. Well, another drink and chalk in hand, the vagabond began to sketch a face that might well buy the soul of any man. And then, as he placed another lock upon the shapely head, with a fearful shriek, he leaped and fell across the picture, dead. The Face on the Barroom Floor by Hugh Antone Darcy.
Oh, wonderful.
Wow. That was, do you happen to know when that poem was written, Elaine? Do you know?
I looked it up once. It was back in the 1700s, I think.
Oh my God.
The poem was written long, long ago, and the painting in the barroom was done, I think, in the 1950s or something.
Mhm.
Wow.
That
Yeah,
was,
we visited one in Carson City and another in Colorado that claimed to be the original.
Yeah, the one in Colorado claims to be the original, and they used to hand out postcards with the part of the beginning of the poem on it. But the problem is, now that I know the poem, and for years I used to say, I wonder which came first, the poem or the painting of the poem. And then I looked it up online and got this information on it. And it turns out that the painting was done by an artist who did map drawing originally and then painted murals on walls. And he was hired by different principalities to go to their town and paint a significant kind of wall painting. Yeah.
Interesting.
And he got in a fight with the woman who hired him to come to Central City to do some art. And they got talking art, and she thought she was a great connoisseur of fine art. They argued about it, and he said no, and she stormed out of the bar where they were talking. And the guy that ran the bar said, he worked behind the bar, he didn't run it. He said, boy, she's mad. I don't know if she's going to pay you to do the paintings you came here to do. They talked about it. He said, why don't you come back and show them, paint her a picture on the floor here, show them. And so they planned it. The bar closed, everybody went home, went to bed. He came back to the bar, the guy behind the bar let him in. They both sat there and got drunk. And then he painted a picture of his wife. And she had curly blonde hair, but in the ballad, the woman had dark hair, you know. So it was a completely different person that was painted on the floor. But the people who later bought the bar said, oh, there's a picture. It's like the poem, The Face on the Barroom Floor. We can sell cards and get people to come to the bar because we have the face. You know?
Mm.
So when you listen to the ballad and you look at the picture, the first time I saw the picture, I went, that's nothing like what I thought it would be. And then I kept looking at it going, she doesn't look right. And then I did the ballad and I went, oh, it's not her. It's a different Anyway, there's a lot of good story that goes along with the ballad. You could do a whole picture on it.
Yeah.
Made him come alive, Elaine. You really made that character seem so natural.
Which
for you.
character? The guy in the barroom?
The guy story. Yeah. Yeah.
I love the ballad. I love the way you
First
can
time.
see it happening, and then he leaps across the picture, you know, and dies.
Part.
Yeah.
Little bit surprise ending.
Surprise ending.
Very fine poem.
Wonderful.
I enjoyed everybody's stories. You all told great stories tonight.
We had a really wonderful night of stories, didn't we?
We did.
So many good.
Very fine.
I can remember so much of each one of them too.
All good.
So it seems like a long time away, but it will come up before you know it. Isn't time funny?
Yes,
May, I can't believe we're talking about a May swap already.
that's right.
It will be the second Tuesday, and we will be Zooming. We are getting closer to probably some date when we can all get together again.
How many of you have all had your shots, your vaccination?
Yeah.
I've had two. Okay. It'll be interesting to see because that's part of what the immunity is coming from.
Yeah, that's true.
We'll see.
Well, I got an email today from Kaiser warning about the Johnson and Johnson vaccination and saying people who did get it could have a health problem 3 weeks after the vaccination. And in France, they have been very upset because I have a sister who is a nurse in France, and she keeps hearing of many people having pretty bad side effects and even
Blood
dying.
clots. Yeah.
So I am not ready for the vaccine, I'm sorry, but there are too many. Even where I live, there is a woman I've been in the hospital for 1 week after getting the vaccine. Not the Johnson, I don't know which one she got. But. So I've been taking some homeopathy to strengthen my immune system, and I will postpone as long as possible to get the vaccine. So I may not be able to join you if you meet in person, but we'll see. By the way, I still don't understand people who got the vaccine, why they should be afraid of people who have not get it, since the vaccine is supposed to protect them.
You can still get COVID even after you've had the shots. The difference is you don't get as sick. You probably won't have to be admitted to a hospital, and you won't be on a ventilator or die.
Right.
You
I
can't
hope so
get that
too.
kind of hold on you, but it can make you sick, and nobody wants to get sick.
No, but I think people who are not vaccinated are in the same situation because they said you can get it now from people who got the vaccine.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh well.
Yes. Well,
It's a matter of reducing percentages
that's
Yeah, that's it.
and managing risk.
all right. Well, I would
Okay.
like to thank each and every one of you for coming this month. We had a really intimate but very powerful group tonight. I thought it was really wonderful, and so thank you for. I always feel good for a week after we have our swap, and then I start looking forward to the next one, and I feel the same way. Thank
Well,
you all
we
very
love
much.
having you, Brandon.
Thank
Have
you,
a good
Brenda.
month. Thank you,
Thank
Brandon
you.
and
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye,
Nice
everybody.
job.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Sorry.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you all. for your
And
stories.
Thank you.
and Gay, give me some news. Hey, Gay, give me some news. Did you hear
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. No,
Okay.
we'll keep in touch.